Rain poured relentlessly over New York, drumming against the sleek glass windows of an expensive black car. Heavy droplets slid down the surface, distorting the neon lights of the city into a hazy, dreamlike glow. The streets were alive with movement, figures rushing through the downpour, horns blaring, tires splashing through puddles. Inside the car, Nathan Sterling sat in silence, his sharp gaze following the raindrops as they streaked across the window. At 36, he was the CEO of Sterling Financial, a man who had built an empire with nothing but discipline and an iron grip on control. Wealth, power, and respect, he had it all. And yet, beneath it all, he felt nothing. Love had never been something he believed in. He had learned that lesson early. His parents had once whispered promises of forever, only for their devotion to wither into resentment. Sweet words turned to bitter fights, and by the time he was 10, his mother had walked out of his life, leaving nothing behind but a short letter and a fractured childhood. Since then, Nathan had understood one simple truth: love was an illusion, and trusting someone only led to disappointment. And then, on this cold, rain-drenched night, he saw her. A young woman sat curled up beneath the awning of a closed cafe, her slender frame hunched against the relentless downpour. Her clothes clung to her like a second skin, soaked through, her damp hair plastered to her face. But despite her situation, she held her head high. Her gaze wasn't filled with desperation but with quiet, unyielding determination. The traffic light turned green. The driver hesitated, waiting for instructions. Nathan should have ignored her, should have continued on his way to his penthouse. Instead, his voice cut through the steady hum of the rain. "Stop the car." The vehicle rolled to a halt at the curb. Without a second thought, Nathan stepped out, unfazed by the icy rain soaking through his tailored suit. Water dripped from his hair, sliding down the sharp angles of his face, but he paid it no attention. His focus was solely on the woman before him. She noticed him instantly. Her gaze locked onto his, sharp and guarded. "You're going to freeze to death out here," he said, his tone calm and matter-of-fact. She shifted slightly, as if trying to make herself appear stronger, more composed. "I don't need help." Nathan's gaze flicked to her trembling fingers, to the useless protection her soaked sweater offered. "I think you do." She didn't respond, pressing her lips into a firm line as though refusing to admit the truth. Nathan exhaled, a rare flicker of patience in his usually detached demeanor. "Get in the car. I'm not asking for anything in return, but you can't sit here all night in this weather." For a long moment, she studied him, as though searching for the hidden motive behind his offer. Finally, with no other choice, she gave a small nod. Nathan opened the door, gesturing for her to enter first. Once she was inside, he slid in beside her, shutting the door and signaling the driver to continue. Silence filled the car, the only sounds the faint hum of the engine and the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows. Nathan cast a glance her way. "What's your name?" She hesitated before answering. "Elena." His brow lifted slightly. "Elena what?" Her gaze shifted toward the window, her voice quieter. "Elena Brooks." Nathan nodded, committing the name to memory. "Where do you live?" Elena's fingers curled into her lap. "I don't have anywhere to go." That answer shouldn't have mattered to him. It shouldn't have made a difference. And yet somehow it did. He leaned back against the seat, considering something for a moment before speaking again. "I need a housekeeper. If you want, you can work for me." Elena turned to him, her eyes widening slightly. "Are you serious?" Nathan nodded. "I'm not in the habit of helping people. But I need someone to keep my place in order, and you need a job. If you agree, you can stay at my house for now." She stared at him, suspicion flickering across her features, searching for a trap in his words. But finally, she gave a slow nod. "Fine. But just until I find something else." Nathan smirked slightly. "Suit yourself." And just like that, on a cold rain-drenched night neither of them would soon forget, two strangers unknowingly stepped into each other's lives. The car pulled up in front of a sleek high-rise in the heart of Manhattan, its glass facade reflecting the shimmering city lights. Elena stared up at the towering building, hesitation flickering in her green eyes. She had never stepped foot in a place so luxurious before. Even though she had agreed to Nathan's offer, she still couldn't quite believe she was here. Nathan said nothing, merely leading her inside. His penthouse was vast, immaculate, a breathtaking masterpiece of modern design, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. Yet, despite its perfection, the space lacked warmth. It was too pristine, too curated, more like a showroom than a home. Nathan tossed his keys onto the counter and turned to her. "Your room is down the hall. Last door on the left. You can start working in the morning." Elena nodded, gripping the strap of her bag a little tighter. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Nathan merely inclined his head before disappearing into his office without another word. The next morning, when he emerged from his bedroom, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. He stepped into the kitchen and found Elena bustling about, preparing breakfast. She looked completely different from the rain-soaked woman he had found the night before.
She glanced up, hesitant.
"I wasn't sure what you liked for breakfast, so I kept it simple." Nathan's gaze swept over the neatly arranged table. It had been a long time since anyone had prepared a proper breakfast for him. He pulled out a chair and took a sip of the coffee.
Not bad.
As the days passed, their shared living arrangement settled into an unspoken rhythm. Elena worked diligently, keeping the apartment in order, ensuring meals were always ready on time. But more than that, she unknowingly brought a quiet change into the space. Nathan started noticing small things. The living room lights were always left on when he worked late. A cup of coffee was always waiting for him in the morning. The once sterile apartment had traces of warmth, a vase of fresh flowers on the dining table, cushions slightly out of place, as though someone actually lived there. And then there were Elena's little habits. Every morning, she scribbled something in a small notebook. In the late afternoons, she sat quietly, lost in the pages of a book. When deep in thought, she had a habit of twirling a strand of hair around her finger. And every night, no matter how busy she was, she always took a few minutes to sit by the window, gazing out at the city lights. Nathan had invited her into his home out of convenience.
Nothing more.
But little by little, he realized he had grown more accustomed to her presence than he had ever intended. Rain poured relentlessly over New York, heavy droplets striking the sleek glass windows of an expensive black car. The city's neon lights blurred through the downpour, casting a hazy glow over the bustling streets. Inside the dimly lit vehicle, Nathan Sterling sat in the back seat, silent, his sharp gaze following the raindrops streaking across the glass. At 36, he was the formidable CEO of Sterling Financial, a man who had built an empire with nothing but discipline and unyielding control. Wealth, power, respect, he had it all. And yet, beneath the carefully curated success, he felt nothing. Love had never been a part of his world. He had learned that lesson early. His parents, once the perfect image of devotion, had crumbled under the weight of their own promises. Sweet whispers turned to bitter arguments, and by the time he was 10, his mother had walked out of their lives, leaving behind only a short letter and a fractured childhood. Since then, he had understood one absolute truth: love was an illusion, and trusting someone only led to disappointment. But then, on this cold rain-drenched night, he saw her. A young woman sat curled beneath the awning of a closed cafe, her clothes soaked through, her hair clinging to her face. Yet, despite the biting wind and relentless rain, she held her head high. Her eyes weren't filled with desperation, but with quiet determination. The traffic light ahead turned green. The driver glanced at Nathan, waiting for instructions. He should have ignored her. He should have continued on, returning to his penthouse and leaving the nameless woman to her fate. Instead, his voice cut through the quiet hum of the car. "Stop." The tires skidded slightly as the car rolled to a halt at the curb. Without hesitation, Nathan stepped out, the cold rain immediately soaking into his tailored suit. Water dripped from his hair, sliding down his face, but he paid no attention to it. His focus was entirely on the woman before him. She noticed him instantly, her sharp gaze locking onto his with guarded wariness. "You're going to freeze to death out here," he said, his voice calm, matter-of-fact. She shifted slightly, as if trying to make herself appear stronger despite the tremble in her fingers. "I don't need help." Nathan glanced at the useless fabric of her drenched sweater, the way she clenched her hands as though trying to keep herself warm. "I think you do." She didn't answer, her lips pressing into a firm line as if refusing to admit the truth. A rare flicker of patience entered his tone. "Get in the car." "I'm not asking for anything in return, but you can't sit here all night in this weather." For a long moment, she hesitated, studying him, as though searching for any hidden motives behind his words. Finally, with no other option, she gave a small nod. Nathan stepped aside, opening the door for her. She slid into the car, her movements careful, cautious. Once she was inside, he followed, shutting the door before signaling the driver to continue. The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken questions. Nathan cast a glance her way. "What's your name?" She hesitated before replying, "Elena." "Elena what?" Her gaze drifted toward the window, her voice quieter this time. "Elena Brooks." Nathan nodded, committing the name to memory. "Where do you live?" She clasped her hands together. "I don't have anywhere to go." That answer shouldn't have mattered to him. It shouldn't have made any difference. And yet somehow it did. He leaned back against the seat, considering something for a brief moment before speaking again.
I need a housekeeper.
If you want, you can work for me. Elena turned to him, her eyes widening slightly. Are you serious? Nathan gave a small nod. I'm not in the habit of helping people, but I need someone to keep my place in order.
And you need a job.
If you agree, you can stay at my place for now. She stared at him, as if searching for a trick, for some kind of condition hidden in his offer. Finally, after a long pause, she gave a slow nod.
Fine.
But just until I find something else. Nathan smirked slightly.
Suit yourself.
And just like that, on a rainy night neither of them would forget, two strangers unknowingly stepped into each other's lives. When the car pulled up in front of the sleek high-rise in the heart of New York, Elena hesitated, staring up at the towering building. She had never stepped foot in a place so luxurious before. Though she had agreed to Nathan's offer, it still felt unreal. He said nothing, simply leading her inside. His penthouse was immaculate, vast and breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the glittering city skyline. But despite its perfection, it lacked warmth. It felt more like a meticulously curated showroom than a home. Nathan tossed his keys onto the counter and turned to her. Your room is down the hall. Last door on the left. You can start working in the morning. Elena clutched the strap of her bag a little tighter, nodding. Thank you for giving me a chance. Nathan simply nodded before heading into his office without another word. The next morning, when he emerged from his bedroom, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. He stepped into the kitchen to find Elena bustling around, preparing breakfast. She looked different from the rain-soaked woman he had found the night before.
She glanced up, a bit hesitant.
I wasn't sure what you liked, so I kept it simple. Nathan's gaze swept over the neatly arranged table, steaming coffee, eggs, toast. He couldn't remember the last time someone had prepared a meal for him. He pulled out a chair, took a sip of the coffee and murmured, not bad. As days passed, their arrangement settled into an easy rhythm. Initially, it was just business. Elena kept the penthouse in order, ensuring meals were ready on time.
But little by little, something changed.
Nathan started noticing small details, the way she left the living room lights on when he worked late, how a cup of coffee was always waiting on the table in the morning. And more than anything, the way Elena constantly kept herself occupied, as if stopping would make her feel lost. He found himself watching her more than he should. Late one evening, as he walked past the living room, he saw her fast asleep on the couch, a book open in her hands. In sleep, she looked smaller, her usual guarded expression softened. Without thinking, he slipped off his jacket and gently draped it over her. He stood there a moment longer than necessary, watching her. For the first time in years, his penthouse no longer felt quite so empty.